Jason Miller and Emily Sanders. Lives were connected by a shocking tragedy that no one saw coming. One disappeared, the other's secret tore a town apart. In a quiet suburban town, life seemed perfect. Tree-lined streets, manicured lawns, and families waving at each other in the evenings gave the impression of safety and calm. Children rode their bikes and played in the yards, while neighbors exchanged small talk and occasional baked goods. The Miller family was a part of this picture-perfect life. Jason Miller, the 17-year-old son of a highly respected FBI agent, lived in a large, neat house at the end of a cul-de-sac. To outsiders, Jason was the ideal teenager, polite, intelligent, and seemingly well-behaved. His father's position in the FBI only added an aura of respectability and trust to the family name. People assumed that such a background provided a shield against trouble, that nothing dangerous could ever touch them. Emily Sanders, a 13-year-old girl, was equally well known in the neighborhood. Bright, cheerful, and full of life, she was loved by her teachers and adored by her friends. She often played outside after school, riding her bike to the park or walking home with friends. Her parents always reminded her to stay alert, but the town had always felt safe. No one imagined that danger could come from the very street they lived on, from a house just a few doors down. One ordinary afternoon, Emily left school with her backpack slung over her shoulder, expecting to walk home in the familiar calm of the neighborhood. But she never arrived. Panic rippled through the community as parents discovered that she was missing. The local police sprang into action, setting up roadblocks, interviewing neighbors, and checking CCTV footage from nearby stores. The news traveled quickly. Families huddled inside their homes, and children were closely monitored, no longer allowed to play freely in the streets. As the search continued, whispers began to circulate about suspicious activity near the Miller house. Some neighbors had noticed Jason lingering around the park and watching children pass by. Others claimed they had seen him sitting alone in his room for hours, writing in a notebook they could not see. The contrast between his public persona and these subtle behaviors puzzled many. The police at first focused on broader leads: strangers in the area, possible abductions, anyone who didn't belong. Yet the clues, small and scattered, were quietly pointing in a terrifying direction. While the community feared the worst, Jason maintained his usual appearance of normalcy. He walked to school, helped his younger sister with homework, and smiled politely at neighbors. No one could have predicted that the same teenager who appeared so controlled could be hiding such darkness inside. Beneath the surface of this ordinary suburban life, secrets simmered, secrets that would soon explode into a nightmare for the entire town. The disappearance of Emily Sanders marked the beginning of a story that would unravel every assumption about trust, family, and the hidden dangers lurking behind the most ordinary faces. Jason Miller had always been a study in contrasts. On the surface, he was the ideal teenager, charming, disciplined, and academically gifted. Teachers praised his work ethic, coaches appreciated his dedication, and neighbors admired his politeness. But beneath that calm exterior, a darker side lingered, hidden from everyone who trusted him. While his father's FBI career cast a long shadow over the family, Jason seemed both influenced by and resistant to it. He followed the rules in public but privately explored thoughts and fantasies that no one could have imagined. The first clues to his hidden darkness emerged in the quiet corners of the internet. Authorities would later discover that Jason frequented forums where violent and disturbing ideas were discussed. He left cryptic comments, posted unsettling images, and engaged in conversations that hinted at obsession and control. These were behaviors he carefully hid from friends and family, carefully crafting a dual life, one of the obedient son and student, the other of a secretive, brooding mind fascinated by power and manipulation. Neighbors looking back began to notice small but unusual behaviors. Jason's room was always locked, his window blinds tightly closed, and sometimes faint sounds of scratching or typing could be heard late at night. Some parents recalled Emily passing by the Miller house on her way to the park. They had never thought much of it, but in hindsight, it seemed ominous. Jason had a pattern of watching from the windows, often appearing detached yet intensely focused. It was subtle, easy to dismiss, but it was part of a growing web of warning signs that no one had fully understood. School life offered a different mask. Jason participated in clubs and sports, earning accolades that reinforced the image of a normal teenager. Teachers commented on his intelligence and maturity, and peers admired him without hesitation. Yet the journals he kept in secret told a completely different story. Pages filled with detailed fantasies of control, obsession, and violence suggested that he was planning something much darker than anyone could have predicted. The more investigators later uncovered, the clearer it became that these writings were not idle thoughts. They were blueprints for actions that would shatter a community. As police continued searching for Emily, evidence slowly began pointing toward Jason. It was not a single glaring mistake that revealed him, but a series of small, interconnected patterns. Footprints near her usual route, digital breadcrumbs online, and subtle surveillance of Emily's daily movements. The combination of his calculated public persona and private obsessions made him both difficult to suspect and extraordinarily dangerous. Authorities realized that this was no ordinary missing person case. It was a tragedy waiting to unfold, hidden behind the mask of suburban normalcy. The town, still in shock from Emily's disappearance, began to feel the tension rise. Parents watched their children closely. Neighbors exchanged anxious whispers, and a sense of unease settled over the streets that had once felt so safe. The image of Jason as the model teenager now seemed fragile, almost deceptive. The deeper the police dug, the more they realized that someone so close to law enforcement could exploit trust, hide darkness, and commit acts that would leave a permanent scar on the community. Behind the ordinary walls of the Miller house, a hidden darkness had been growing for years, ready to emerge in ways no one could have imagined. Days passed, and the tension in the town grew unbearable. Every corner, every empty street seemed to hold a shadow of fear. Then came the call that would shatter the fragile calm. A tip had led police to a remote wooded area on the outskirts of town. The ground was soft and disturbed, as if someone had tried to hide something quickly. Officers worked cautiously, their shovels cutting through the earth, their hearts heavy with dread. It wasn't long before they uncovered Emily's backpack. Inside were personal items she had carried daily, her school books, her favorite notebook, and traces of her blood. Panic turned to horror. Forensic teams combed the area, carefully collecting evidence. Footprints, fingerprints, and other microscopic traces began to paint a chilling picture. As tests came back, one name emerged with terrifying clarity: Jason Miller. DNA evidence confirmed what no one wanted to believe. The same teenager who had seemed so normal, so trustworthy, was directly tied to the disappearance and death of Emily Sanders. It was a betrayal of trust so profound that the community struggled to process it. How could the son of a respected FBI agent commit such an atrocity? Police officers approached Jason cautiously, knowing that the evidence against him was strong but aware that human reactions are unpredictable. When confronted, he remained calm, almost eerily detached. There was no visible panic, no sign of remorse. His outward composure contrasted sharply with the devastation around him, a stark reminder that appearances can be dangerously misleading. In the minds of investigators, a chilling realization began to settle. This was not a crime of opportunity, but a premeditated act, the culmination of years of secret obsession and hidden intent. The revelation sent shockwaves through the town. Neighbors who had waved to Jason on the street now questioned everything they thought they knew. Families recoiled in disbelief, and parents tightened their hold on their children, unable to reconcile the horror with the ordinary life they had once trusted. The Miller family faced scrutiny from every angle. Jason's father, a man who had dedicated his life to enforcing the law and protecting others, was now confronted with the unimaginable truth. His own son had broken the very code he had sworn to uphold. As the investigation unfolded, more details emerged. Surveillance footage from nearby stores, social media activity, and testimonies from peers revealed a pattern of stalking and obsession. Jason had tracked Emily's movements, planned encounters, and manipulated situations to isolate her. Each new piece of evidence painted him not as a troubled teenager, but as someone capable of meticulous and calculated violence. It became clear that the tragedy was not an accident or a moment of impulse. It was the result of a dark, methodical mind working behind a veneer of normalcy. The community struggled to reconcile the facts with the faces they had known for years. Every friendly wave, every polite smile now seemed tainted by the knowledge of what had really been happening behind closed doors. Fear, anger, and grief intermingled, leaving the town unsettled and vulnerable. For Emily's family, the pain was unimaginable, a constant ache that no explanation could soothe. For Jason's family, the betrayal cut even deeper, a private horror mirrored in public shame. The story that had begun with a simple disappearance had transformed into a nightmare, one that exposed hidden darkness in the most unexpected place and challenged every assumption about trust, safety, and innocence. After his arrest, Jason Miller was transferred to a juvenile detention center, a place meant to hold troubled youth safely while the legal system determined their fate. But the moment he stepped inside, the atmosphere shifted. Guards watched him closely, aware of the gravity of his crime. Other inmates whispered and stared, sensing the notoriety that surrounded his name. For Jason, the walls that had once hidden him now confined him, and the weight of reality began to press in from every side. Inside the facility, life was regimented. Mornings began with head counts, breakfasts, and assigned tasks. Jason attended mandatory counseling sessions and attempted to navigate a world that was unfamiliar, yet the calm demeanor he had shown outside persisted. He followed routines, completed assignments, and maintained a quiet presence, blending into the background. But behind that stillness, investigators and psychologists suspected something far more complex. His detachment, which had helped him hide his dark side for so long, now became a subject of intense scrutiny. Meanwhile, his father, once a figure of public trust and authority, faced the harsh glare of media attention. Headlines screamed of betrayal, secrecy, and the unimaginable truth that an FBI agent's son had committed murder. Colleagues distanced themselves, some offering sympathy, others questioning judgment and oversight. Public opinion was relentless, dividing the community into factions of outrage and disbelief. Friends and neighbors struggled to reconcile the image of the boy they thought they knew with the horrific reality. Jason's days in detention were marked by routine, but haunted by reflection. He spent hours in isolation, staring at the walls, writing in notebooks, and thinking about the events that had brought him there. Psychologists later suggested that he was grappling with a mixture of guilt, shame, and detachment, though the true depth of his internal struggle remained unknowable. He rarely spoke to others, and when he did, his words were careful, calculated, and minimal. Some guards found him polite and cooperative, yet an unspoken tension lingered, as though a storm could erupt at any moment. Then came the shocking turn that stunned both the facility and the public. Jason was found dead in his cell. Initial reports suggested suicide, but the details were unclear. Guards and investigators questioned how a young man under such scrutiny could end his life, and families demanded answers. Speculation ran rampant. Had he acted out of guilt? Had someone else been involved? Was it negligence within the facility? The uncertainty added another layer of horror to an already tragic story, leaving everyone with more questions than answers. The aftermath left scars that no one could ignore. The local community, still grappling with Emily's murder, now faced the unnerving reality that justice had been only partially served. Families feared for their own children. Parents questioned their judgment, and the Miller family was forever marked by public shame and private grief. Jason's death in custody intensified debates about responsibility, supervision, and the limits of understanding human behavior. The town learned that even when a criminal is caught, the consequences ripple outward, touching lives in ways no one can fully predict or contain. It was a stark reminder that darkness can hide in plain sight, that appearances can be deceiving, and that some tragedies leave wounds that never truly heal. The town struggled to recover after the double tragedy. Emily Sanders' family, heartbroken and traumatized, decided to move away, leaving behind a home filled with memories and a community that had failed to protect their child. The streets, once alive with the laughter of children, now felt quieter, almost haunted. Parents became hypervigilant, watching their children's every step, and neighbors spoke in hushed tones about what had happened, unable to comprehend that someone so close could harbor such darkness. The sense of safety that had defined the neighborhood was gone, replaced by suspicion and fear. Jason's father, once a symbol of justice and integrity, resigned from the FBI. The weight of public scrutiny, combined with personal grief and guilt, proved too much to bear. Friends and colleagues speculated on how a man trained to detect danger had failed to see the warning signs in his own home. The questions were endless. Could he have noticed Jason's obsession earlier? Was there something more he could have done? No answer seemed sufficient, and the blame, whether fair or not, lingered like a shadow over his reputation and his life. The community, meanwhile, struggled with the implications of the tragedy. Schools increased security measures, parents demanded background checks for volunteers, and local authorities implemented new protocols to monitor troubled youth. Psychologists and social workers emphasized the importance of mental health awareness, stressing that hidden struggles often go unnoticed until it is too late. Conversations that had once been uncomfortable about obsession, violence, and warning signs in teenagers became urgent and unavoidable. People began to realize that evil is not always obvious, and that appearances can deceive even the most cautious observers. Emily's story, tragic as it was, became a cautionary tale. News outlets covered the events extensively, highlighting the risks of hidden darkness in seemingly ordinary places. Experts analyzed the case, discussing the psychology of obsession and the pressures faced by children growing up in highly structured environments. The tragedy was dissected in public forums, but for those who knew Emily, it was never just theory. It was a painful reality that could never be undone. For Jason's family, the aftermath was equally devastating. The home that had once been filled with laughter became a place of silence. Jason's death left unanswered questions that would haunt them forever. While some believed he had taken his life out of guilt, others wondered whether the detention facility had failed him. The truth, like so much in this story, was layered and complex, resistant to simple explanations. What remained certain was the permanent mark left on the town, the family, and the lives touched by these events. Ultimately, the tragedy exposed the fragility of trust and the unpredictability of human behavior. It reminded the world that even in places of apparent safety, darkness can thrive unnoticed. The story of Emily and Jason became a warning, a lesson in vigilance, empathy, and awareness. It forced families, communities, and authorities to confront uncomfortable truths and to recognize that the most ordinary facades can conceal extraordinary danger. The scars remained visible, the grief enduring, but in the awareness born from tragedy, there was hope that future disasters might be prevented. The town, forever changed, learned a hard truth. Safety is never guaranteed. Innocence can be lost in a single moment, and the consequences of hidden darkness can ripple far beyond what anyone could imagine.